How did the universe begin? Was it a big bang, or did something else cause it to come into existence? Was it always here, or did a creator have a hand in it? Apparently, all atheists and non-believers sweat at the mere mention of what we're about to look at. The Kalam Cosmological Argument. Hello, I'm the Skeptic. I watch videos on YouTube that make extraordinary claims, whether that's flat earth or strange conspiracies, but mostly the claim that a god is real and then explain why I can't accept their position. Before we get into today's video, please do subscribe, hit that bell notification to be alerted for my next video, and drop a like. That would be superb. I encourage thinking about things, as it naturally leads to asking questions, so I was happy to find a YouTuber called Tiny Thoughts. Even small thoughts are good, right? I noticed in the description of this video, he said his ultimate goal is not to get atheists to sweat, but to reconsider their beliefs and ultimately come to be saved by Jesus. Well, okay then, let's see.
So today we're going to be looking at perhaps one of the most powerful arguments for God's existence. And this is an argument that's been around for quite some time, and I believe that every Christian needs to know this argument.
Every Christian, huh? What about all the other religions? Why wouldn't they need to know?
This argument has been a thorn in the side of atheists.
Why just atheists? Does this argument only offer backup for Christianity? Surely if it was correct, it would prove that Muslims, Hindus, Scientologists, and all the others aren't right either.
And if you've ever seen an atheist interact with this argument in a debate, usually they struggle to respond to this argument well, which is why I think this argument is so powerful.
Oh, now I'm nervous.
So first I'm going to give an overview of the argument, and then we're going to go through the argument step by step, and we're going to look at some of the more common objections and some of the more powerful objections to the argument and how we can respond to these objections. So let's dive right in.
Yes, please.
So this argument, known as the Kalam Cosmological Argument, goes as follows. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause.
Just to clarify, the Kalam Cosmological Argument is one of many arguments for the existence of stuff due to a god. Most cosmological arguments state that everything had a cause, and so when this is offered, it's perfectly reasonable to suggest that a god or gods that apparently created the universe would also require a cause, going back and back and back down an infinite path of causation. The Kalam makes a minor adjustment to other arguments stating that everything that begins to exist has a cause, but that a god has always existed. With that being said, looking at these premises, let's just say that we accept the definition of begins to exist as what we see colloquially, since it can be argued that things have always existed in a sense of energy and matter, and that universes could cycle in and out of existence. Just because it's stated that things need a cause, nowhere on these premises does it say a god, so I'm not sure how this can demonstrate one.
Now, additionally, you can add two more steps to this argument to really drive the argument home. And these last two steps are, if the universe has a cause, then an uncaused personal creator of the universe exists, who without the universe is beginningless, changeless, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, and enormously powerful.
Whoa, that's a huge jump. How on earth did you get to a personal god? That's the same as saying, everything needs a cause, I can't understand a natural one, so it must have been a god. Well, I might change premise 4 to, if the universe has a cause, then uncaused universe creating elves did it, or universe creating unicorns, or universe creating griffins. If you're going to insert a god into this, you'd need to demonstrate there actually was a god to insert.
And then finally, the last step, therefore an uncaused personal creator of the universe exists, who without the universe is beginningless, changeless, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, and enormously powerful.
So basically, saying a god exists because you said so. This would mean my universe-creating griffins exist. If only I'd said universe-creating dragons. Existing dragons would have been cool. Oh, darn it.
So let's take a look at this argument step by step. The first premise is that everything that begins to exist has a cause. Now, this first premise seems undeniable. It seems common sense, right?
Well, in that we know that the current observable local universe had a moment in time that it came into existence, yes. But who's to say the reason that this universe came to be wasn't because of another universe ending? The universe is bouncing in and out of existence all the time.
Nothing can begin to exist without a cause. You and I did not begin to exist without a cause.
But we can also explain our beginning to exist with natural, explainable chemical reactions. So why would that equal a god?
Our parents came together in procreation, which caused us to come into existence. There is a cause to our existence. Now, if this first premise weren't true, then there wouldn't really be any good reason as to why we don't see things popping into existence uncaused all the time. In fact, there's no counterexample that anyone can produce of something coming into existence without a cause.
Fine, that can be accepted, but you can't just then jump to a floaty sky man did it. Even the Big Bang Theory suggests what caused it to happen. Ideas that are observable and testable, not plucked out of thin air.
So how does anyone object to this premise? Well, a really bad but commonly used objection that isn't really much of an objection to this premise is, what about God? Who created God?
Well, you'd have to suggest that a god did it for that to be asked. I might ask who created the universe created dragons I forgot to imagine into existence earlier.
If someone asks this question, you can immediately tell that maybe they're just not familiar with the Kalam Cosmological Argument, or they just haven't really grappled with it seriously. The first premise only applies to things that begin to exist, which would not apply to God because God has always existed.
And that's where issues start to arise. You can't just say a god has always existed without demonstrating it to be the case. I think atheists sweat because it gets annoying that theists assume asserting things to be the case means, in their mind, it's the truth.
And in fact, we have a name for so-called gods that began to exist. These gods are called idols. And we know that idols could not have created the universe since they themselves were created.
I'm not asserting this to be the case, but how on earth could you know that if there was a god, it hadn't created universe-creating idols to do its work for it? When you say that something created the universe, the list of things that could have done it is endless. He then goes on to talk about quantum mechanics and states he doesn't understand it, but still spends a good 2 minutes talking about it. I wouldn't pretend to understand where it's going, but he ends up reading things which I don't think offer anything more to the argument. Maybe he just wanted to sound more smart. I don't know. Check it out if you wish. The link is in the description.
Now, the next premise is that the universe began to exist. Now, this premise too seems undeniable. All the evidence that we have points to the universe beginning to exist.
Of course, science demonstrates that there was in fact a point where our local universe began to exist, still failing to see how that points to a god.
And what has been taught by Christians for centuries has only recently, maybe in the past 60 years or so, become more commonly accepted in the scientific community.
No. Christians for centuries have been saying God created the heavens and the earth. Where in science has that ever been accepted? Unless I've missed something, that's just untrue.
In fact, the notion that the universe began to exist started to gain popularity in the scientific community when Friedman and Lemaitre predicted an expanding universe, which, if we would have gone backwards, would have meant that the universe would have had a beginning.
But that's not exactly what Christians have been saying, so twisting this to fit a narrative is a little dishonest.
Lemaitre actually proposed the Big Bang, even though he faced resistance from some of the leading scientists at the time, such as Arthur Eddington and Fred Hoyle, who sarcastically coined the term Big Bang to insult the theory. Now, even Lawrence Krauss, as hostile as he is to theists, admits that all the evidence suggests that our universe had a beginning.
All the evidence suggests our universe had a beginning.
So what's the objection to this premise? Well, the objection to this premise is, well, the universe has always existed. But there are a couple problems with this objection. The first is the second law of thermodynamics, which teaches that in a closed, isolated system, the entropy is always increasing. What this means is that there'll be less and less usable energy as time goes on. Useful forms of energy get converted to heat every time work is done, so there's less and less usable energy in the universe. Now, if the universe had always existed, that means that there'd be no usable energy right now, because an infinite amount of time would have elapsed, allowing all the useful energy to be converted to entropy, to heat. And we wouldn't be able to move our hands. We wouldn't be alive. there would be no useful energy left in the universe, which is clearly not the case.
So, because we can move, it demonstrates that the universe had a beginning? Did I just sum up all that in one pointless sentence? Pointing to laws of thermodynamics, again, something of which I know nothing about, doesn't demonstrate a god or gods. It merely contributes to the assessment that our local universe probably did have a point where it started. So what? I think many folks are already convinced of that.
And you don't just have to take my word for it. Listen to what physicist Alexander Vilenkin writes in grappling with the idea of an eternal universe. Vilenkin writes, "There is another way that the universe might be eternal in the past."
Let me cut you off there. Whether the universe did or didn't have a point of coming into existence is irrelevant to there being a creator. Let's jump to the next point, as this next bit is basically just waffle. Which, just to remind you, you can see on the original video in the description.
Now, I want to point out that Alexander Vilenkin himself is not a Christian, he's not a theist, and in fact, he ultimately rejects the Kalam Cosmological Argument, and instead, he tries to propose something called quantum tunneling. Now, in Vilenkin's quantum tunneling model, ultimately, the universe comes into existence from mathematical laws, from mathematical equations. But there's a problem with that. Mathematical laws and equations don't cause reality. They have no impact on reality. They're abstract objects.
I would think a more accurate description would be an abstract science rather than object. Maths isn't a physical object. It's a method and description used to explain stuff.
And you see that even Vilenkin himself ultimately wrestles with this point. He writes in his book, Many Worlds in One, "Does this mean that the laws are not mere descriptions of reality and can have an independent existence of their own? In the absence of space, time, and matter, what tablets could they be written upon? The laws are expressed in the form of mathematical equations. If the medium of mathematics is the mind, does this mean that the mind should predate the universe?"
It's a fun concept to imagine, minds predating universes, but it doesn't sound as though Vilenkin is asserting that, merely asking questions to make you think and ask questions.
Now, when I hear Vilenkin write that, I just want to say, that's why you need God.
I don't assume that's the conclusion he was aiming for. And you shouldn't get to go, I can't explain X, therefore God.
Math cannot create reality. Mathematical equations do not cause things to come into being.
Tell me you don't understand the concept of mathematics without telling me you don't understand the concept of mathematics.
And actually, I'm reminded of John chapter 1, which says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made."
I mean, at this point, it would make sense to point to a book that still hasn't even been demonstrated to be the word of a god, so carry on.
God is that word. God is that logos that caused the universe to come into being, and that answers Stephen Hawking's question that he posed in A Brief History of Time. What is it that breathes fire into the equations and makes a universe for them to describe?
Universe creating dragons! Universe creating dragons! I mean, at least they breathe fire.
God does.
So we get all the way through all of that just for you to say it was a god, without actually offering anything other than the Bible to demonstrate it. The original argument doesn't even mention a god. You've just added some extra bits in there to make it work for you.
Now, the conclusion of the traditional Kalam cosmological argument is therefore the universe has a cause. The conclusion isn't something that someone can object to because this is a deductive argument, which means that if the premises are true, the conclusion must necessarily follow.
And there's still no mention of the word God, other than what you put in yourself.
But let's take a look at the two additional steps that can be added onto the Kalam cosmological argument, and these have really been popularized by William Lane Craig.
Oh no.
So the next step is, if the universe has a cause, then an uncaused personal creator of the universe exists, who, without the universe, is beginningless, changeless, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, and enormously powerful.
Where did that come from?
So why would this be true? Well, if the universe has a cause, this means that the cause must be beginningless, changeless, and timeless, because time itself came into existence with the beginning of the universe.
Time is something that we use to explain progression of existence as a whole. Our local universe had a start point in that time, but that doesn't mean you get to assert that outside of that, time didn't exist. How could you possibly even know that?
It must be immaterial because matter came into existence with the universe. It must be spaceless because space itself came into existence with the universe.
Or you could think outside the box in a naturalistic way and not just assume that this is it.
And it must be enormously powerful to cause the universe to come into existence. And on top of that, the cause must be personal. So why must the cause be personal? Well, if the cause transcends time and space and matter, it must be immaterial, it must be timeless.
It must be this and it must be that. Well, sir, it must be demonstrated to be the case.
And there are only two types of things that can be timeless and immaterial.
Only two? Really?
The first is abstract objects, like numbers or mathematical objects. But numbers or mathematical objects cannot cause anything to happen. They can't cause anything in reality to change, to happen. Now, the second type of immaterial reality is a mind. So it makes sense that an unembodied mind caused the universe to come into existence out of nothing.
Maybe it makes sense to you since you're already a believer, but how is that undemonstrated nonsense supposed to convince someone that doesn't agree with a mind creating the universe? You've basically just said, it must be this, because you can't understand what science suggests, which I'm not saying I understand it either, or you can't imagine universe creating dragons, which is sad. In my head, they're pretty cool.
So finally, to drive the conclusion home, therefore an uncaused personal creator of the universe exists, who sans the universe is beginningless, changeless, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, and enormously powerful.
Just saying it doesn't make it true. You can't jump from something caused X to a God did it because my definition of a God fits universe causality.
Now, hopefully you guys found this video helpful.
I wish it did. I just found myself sweating a lot with frustration. Hang on a minute. I'm still not convinced that the Kalam Cosmological Argument proves a God, since you can say anything created the universe. But what do you think? Does this strengthen a theist's position? Let me know in the section below. I'm just going to skeptic this off as not convincing me that a God had anything to do with the moment the universe came to be. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. From me, the skeptic, stay safe, keep thinking logically, and ask questions. Skepticism is the first step towards truth. See you next Saturday.